Doctor Who, Fear of the Dark, by Trevor Baxendale, read by Brian Corrigan. Prologue.
Every dream exists on the precipice of nightmare. Nowhere else but in the subconscious is the divide between comfort and horror so narrow and so fragile. It is almost as if a dream is just waiting to be toppled, its hopes dashed, its promises broken. Nyssa sometimes dreamed of Traken, but the dream always tipped over into nightmare. And the nightmare always ended the same way. She would be hurrying through the gardens and cloisters, calling for her parents, warning them of the disaster she knew was coming, but no one could hear her. Worst of all, she couldn't even find her parents. In her dreams, her mother was still there, a half-remembered face made dear by the imagination, but in nightmare, Nyssa couldn't find her. She ran and searched every secret garden and grove, all the while knowing that time was running out. Her father had disappeared too. In his study sat a man with a dark beard and even darker eyes. He would laugh at her when she arrived, breathless and soundless, at the very moment Traken vanished from the heavens. And she saw that, as if from a distance, the whole planet fading away into the awful blackness of space as if it had never existed. Nyssa woke up, breathing raggedly, the bed sheets tight around her sweating body. She was shivering, although it wasn't cold. It was dark, but she had shut her eyes anyway. There was something nagging at her memory, something she had read in one of the books in the TARDIS library. Nyssa usually stuck to the extensive science journals and textbooks, but she had come across this slender, dusty volume of Earth poetry wedged between Winston's Almanac and A Brief History of Time only a few days ago. It said Keats on the spine, and it had fallen open on a page where 2 lines had been circled in green ink. The thought, the deadly thought of solitude. For some reason, it had stuck in her mind, and now she realized why. When Traken was erased from the cosmos, it had left her the sole remaining person from that world in existence. She had felt so very alone. She felt alone now, sitting on her bed in the dark, listening to the hum of the TARDIS around her. With nothing else to distract her, she was able to concentrate on that noise, the soft reverberation of distant, mysterious engines powering the vessel through the space-time vortex. If she listened carefully, she could imagine that the engines were made quiet only by distance, that the almost subliminal hum was just the final echo of massive, churning machinery. Somewhere deep in the TARDIS, ancient dynamos thundered with terrific, unending exertion. Nyssa found the image quite disturbing. Only then did she realize that normally on her waking, the TARDIS would automatically activate the lights in her room. Softly at first, gradually increasing the lambency as she threw off sleep. But now it was pitch black. She couldn't see a thing, and yet she had the feeling, growing in intensity, that she was not alone. "Is anybody there?" she heard herself ask plaintively. There was no reply. Nyssa pulled her knees up and wrapped the sheets around her more tightly. She peered into the gloom, hoping that perhaps her eyes would soon grow a little more used to the dark, and she might be able to see something. Her ears strained to pick up the slightest sound, but all she could hear was her own heartbeat and the deep, alien breath of the TARDIS. "Where are you?" she asked. There was no reply. Nyssa immediately decided that she had imagined a half-formed phantom left over from her dream of Traken. The perspiration was cold on the exposed skin of her back now. She felt a droplet trickle down her spine like an icy caress. Why wouldn't the lights come on? Perhaps the TARDIS had malfunctioned. It wouldn't be the first time. Her eyes were indeed now more accustomed to the blackness. She could just make out the bed in front of her as a dull grey rectangle in the gloom. Staring, beyond it, there was nothing but the dark. It was exactly the same darkness that Traken had left in its place. Nyssa experienced a nauseating sense of peering into an abyss, of her bed floating like a miniature island in an ocean of night. And then she saw it. At first, it was just a smudge of black against the grayness that marked the end of her bed. Then it inserted itself like a dark finger into the sheet, plucking at the material as it was dragged along the edge of the mattress. Nyssa stopped breathing, but she could hear a low, rasping susurration in the air. There was something in her room with her, something that breathed. Rigid with fear, she watched the finger of blackness spread out into something the size of a hand. Then it started up the bed towards her, expanding like a dark stain across the bed. She cringed as the darkness approached, convinced it would feel cold and wet to the touch. And as the blemish crept up towards her, so the shadows gathered around her, above her, behind her. Soon she would be submerged in the blackness. She opened her mouth to cry out, to call for the doctor and Tegan, but at the last moment she halted, frozen by the sudden sickening fear that her voice would be as silent as it was in her Trocken nightmare. The darkness rose up and engulfed her like a shroud. The loss of vision was so absolute, for a long moment, Nyssa thought that her eyes had been taken from her. She sat, blind and paralyzed with fear. Then something in the darkness touched her.
Message starts.
Okay, sweetheart, you can start talking now. Is it on? Yes, it's running. You can talk to Daddy now. Will he hear me? Sure he will. When this gets to him, it'll take a little time. It's got to go a long, long way. How far? To the edge of the galaxy. What if it goes too far and falls off the edge of the gaxily? Galaxy, not gaxily. Now speak up and Daddy will be able to listen to your message later. Okay. Now?
Nope.
Okay. Hi, Daddy. It's Rosie. Mommy says you'll see me on your viewer when you get this. She says I can talk to you later, too, and then you'll be able to talk back. That will be better because I want to ask you something. I've been having bad dreams at night again. Last night I dreamed a bear and a lion were chasing me and I was scared. Is it silly to be scared of dreams? Mommy lets me sleep in her bed at night, but it's still dark. I don't like it when it's dark. Mommy says there are no bears or lions here, but how can you tell if it's so dark? Mommy says you work in the caves, but it's dark all the time, and you're not scared one bit. Is that right? How come you're not scared? What if a bear or lion comes? Please come home soon, Daddy. I don't like it when you're away. Neither does Kuka. His arms come loose again. Mommy says it's going to drop right off soon, so you'd better come back and fix it real quick. I'm out of time now, so I've got to say bye. Oh, but Daddy, be careful you don't fall off the edge of the gaxily. We miss you. Bye.
Message ends.
Part 1. Into the Void. Thoughts are but dreams till their effects be tried. William Shakespeare. Chapter 1. The dust hadn't settled yet. It hung like a miasma of filth in the cavern, and Stoker thought she was going to choke. She managed a dry cough and picked her way through the men clearing away the debris, until she reached the edge of the rockfall. A large, broad-shouldered man was helping to shift fallen rocks out of the way, and Stoker tapped him on the shoulder. He turned round slowly, eyes fierce above a big jaw covered with a 4-day beard. His hands were big and solid, covered with dust and scratches. Stoker wasn't the least bit bothered. "What the hell do you think you're playing at, Chiung?" She only ever called him Chiung when she was really annoyed. and he had the good grace to look abashed. "I don't know. What went wrong? I'm sorry." "You're supposed to be my explosives expert," Stoker said. "It'll take days to clear up this mess." "It's not as bad as it looks." "Oh, I forgot. You're the expert." Stoker laughed harshly. "X. As in not any more spurt. As in a drip under pressure." She saw the wounded look through her anger and realized it was time to tone it down. They didn't need any more fireworks at the moment. "I'll see you later," she told him. Chiang nodded. "How are the casualties?" "Lucky. The woman's just cuts and contusions. I'm on my way to check the other two now. They're probably filing a massive compensation claim as we speak." Chiang smiled grimly. Stoker watched him turn to pick up another rock and said, "Leave that, you big lummox. Go and help the analyzers. They could do with your muscle." The big lummox pulled a face and stood up, towering over her. Stoker was tall, an easy 6 feet, but Chiang was like a giant, and he could quite literally bend iron bars with his bare hands. The other men loved him because he combined that kind of physical power with a surprisingly gentle manner and good humor. "Go on," she told him, whacking the knuckles of her left hand against his shoulder. "Scoot. I'll handle this." Chiang mock saluted and moved off. Stoker pushed at a rock with the toe of her boot. It was half buried, and it wouldn't budge. She let out a sigh of frustration, then gagged on the dust. A figure appeared in the haze, tall, horned, with a sharp-looking face and huge, staring eyes. "Oh, it's you!" Stoker muttered after an initial flutter of panic. She distracted herself by fixing her blonde hair back in a short ponytail. She guessed she looked a mess.
"This is not good,"
said the horned figure ominously. "Tell me something I don't know, Jal."
"I warned you this was a bad place."
Jal insisted.
"I can sense the evil around us, living in the rock, waiting for its chance to strike."
"Give it a rest, Jal. The situation is bad enough without your endless prophecies of doom. Don't let me catch you telling any of the others that rubbish, do you hear?" Vega Jal looked at her balefully. Stoker couldn't tell if she'd hurt his feelings, but she needed him on her side. "Come on, Jal. I know it's not possible for you to lighten up, but we all need to muck in here." Vega Jal gave a solemn nod, the best she could hope for. "Right," Stoker said. "Where are the casualties?" He pointed back into the swirling fog of dust. "Okay," she said. "Leave this to me." Stoker walked across to where a camp bed and a power lamp had been hastily set up. The dust seemed to have thinned out a bit here, and for a few seconds she just stood and watched the doctor attending to his patient. He was tall, almost boyish with his fair hair and smooth skin, and an intelligent look in his eyes. The white running shoes he wore indicated an active lifestyle, but the rest of him, pale striped trousers and a long fawn-colored jacket, presented as much a mystery to Stoker as his name. She was determined to keep an open mind, however. Stoker's nose had been broken in a bar fight 20 years ago, with the result that she now looked a hell of a lot tougher than she really was. She played up to the image when it was useful, but it had taught her to never judge by appearances. "How's she doing?" Stoker asked, crouching down by the camp bed. There was a girl lying on it. She could only have been 20, with long chestnut curls and very pale skin. There was a nasty gash on her forehead, which the doctor was dabbing with a white cloth. He inspected the cloth, noting the red blotches with a sigh. "She's unconscious," he told her. "I won't really know until she wakes up." "Which will be when, do you think?" "I don't know. She's badly concussed." There was a note of accusation in his voice. "I thought you were a doctor." "Not that kind of doctor, unfortunately. And even if I were, head injuries are notoriously difficult to diagnose properly." Stoker thought for a moment. "We need to move her." "Must we?" "It isn't safe here. There could be another rockfall. I've got men moving equipment out of harm's way, but—" "All right," said the doctor impatiently. "I'll see what I can do. Where's Tegan?" "Back there with the others." Stoker indicated the rear of the cavern. "She wanted to stay with you, but the cut on her leg needed attention. One of my men, Jim Boyd, is dealing with it. He's got a med kit. Will it have synthetic skin patches? Asked the doctor. Yeah, Jim was looking for one big enough to cover your friend's mouth last time I looked. The doctor smiled despite himself. The words patient and Tegan don't go together easily. If you could arrange for some of your fellows to help me, Miss Stoker, we can try to move Nyssa here to a position of greater safety. Who knows? There may even be something in Mr. Boyd's medical kit that might help us. Sure. Stoker stood up. I'll get a couple of my fellows to come over. I'd appreciate it. Stoker backtracked through the rubble, feeling dusty and confused. She needed a drink and some fresh air. But above all, she needed these complications gone. She checked her wrist chrono again, and quickened her pace. As she neared the back of the cavern, where the rock opened out a little, and the dust hadn't quite reached yet, she heard a voice, an unfamiliar, twangy accent, with the sharp note of rising panic buried somewhere inside it.
Never mind the booze, just take me to the doctor! Where is he? I want to see him!
Stoker clambered down the rocky slope that led into the work area. Jim Boyd was just finishing up, and Chiung had stopped to offer a hand. Okay, Jim, you can go, Stoker said. We'll handle this.
Are you in charge here?
Demanded the woman sitting on a supply crate. She had short auburn hair and a determined look. She was young and pretty underneath all the anxiety. Yes, said Stoker. Your doctor friend is coming over now.
What about Nyssa?
I'm going to send a couple of men over to help her. They can't stay by the rock face. It's too dangerous.
You're telling me it is?
I'll go, said Chiung, straightening up. We've stacked all the analyzers now. They'll keep for the time being. So long as we can get them when we need them, cautioned Stoker, fighting down the urge to glance at her chrono again. Chiung spread his hands and grinned his infuriating grin. I've told you, it's sorted. Now, let me go and help with our two new friends over there. Okay, agreed Stoker. But don't take too long about it, Bunny. He moved off, his long legs scrambling quickly and confidently over the loose rubble.
Thanks,
said the girl, Tegan. She sounded genuine.
Your mate's a real trooper.
Bunny Chiung, my right-hand man, said Stoker. Strong as an ogron, soft as a puppy. But he's no fool.
Bunny?
He'd prefer it if we called him Tiger or something. She paused to take a slim cigar from her jacket pocket, and lit it with an old real flame lighter. Don't want all that muscle going to his head, though. So Bunny it is. Fancy a smoke? Tegan shook her head. Stoker blew out a cloud of blue smoke and noted the look of irritation that crossed Tegan's face.
I don't want anything except the doctor and Nyssa. Persistent, aren't you? It has been said.
How's the leg?
Awful.
There was a large patch of syntheskin stuck to Tegan's left thigh, where she had been cut during the rockfall. Stoker stared in puzzlement at the pale material of Tegan's shorts. She was wearing a camisole top and a thin jacket to match. What the hell was she doing around here dressed like that? In fact, the more she thought about it, the more these people didn't make any sense to Stoker. She never worked to what you'd call an actual plan, but this lot at best could only be trouble. At worst, they could constitute a real threat to her operation here. She took another drag on her cigar and sat down on the crate next to Tegan. So, we've got a few minutes. Why don't you tell me what you're doing here? Tegan's shoulders slumped in defeat. She was evidently tired and confused.
Oh, it's a long story.
Great. Stoker gritted her teeth around the cigar. Let's hear it.